Hi, everyone. I'm Sammy, a Senior Account Director at Kite. We are an award-winning B2B communications and tech PR agency. We work with many movers and shakers in the ad tech and media industry. We are also the masterminds behind many events, including this Women in Media Marketing Meetup. We are honored to have these incredible industry powerhouses lend their expertise. Quick ground rules before we start. Please submit questions via the Q&A portal at the bottom of your Zoom. If we have time after the panel discussion, we'll open the floor for audience questions. And reminder, please follow Kite Hill PR on LinkedIn, where we'll be recapping the event. A special thanks to our sponsor, Converge. So we are incredibly excited for this discussion today because mentorship is so important in today's complicated job market. A female quotient event last year noted that AI will not replace jobs, but a woman using AI will. How do you stand out? How do you network? How do you meet a mentor? Why is a mentor important? And in celebration of International Women's Day, we have a panel of industry powerhouses answering all these questions. And without further ado, I pass it over to moderator Kimeko McCoy, senior marketing reporter at Digiday. Please take it away.
Thanks so much, Sammy. Hi, everybody. I'm Kimeko, Senior Marketing Reporter at Digiday. So glad to be here with you all today. And this, as Sammy said, is such a pivotal topic right now and looking ahead. I know in my career, I wouldn't be where I am now without having the mentors, kind of the community that's built itself around me. So excited to talk to Shoshana, Christina, and Kite about what that looks like for them. But before we get started with questions, I'm going to have our speakers introduce themselves and tell you a little about themselves before we get started. So we'll start with you, Shoshana.
Thank you, Kimeko, and thank you so much for having me. My name is Shoshana Winter. For the past 5 months, I've been CEO of Converge, the sponsor of this lovely event. It is my first CEO position in my career, late in my career, which is really exciting and unexpected. I've spent about 30 plus years in a variety of different agency roles, mostly large agencies, and then in startups. I like to say those are two kinds of crazy that I'm addicted to. And I could not be more excited to be in this job at this moment and to have this discussion.
Fantastic. Christina, if you want to introduce yourself next.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Christina Peña. I am the COO and founding partner of NewWorld. We are a strategic insights and creative studio, and we focus on growing trust with diverse audiences in this crazy era of misinformation and dramatic shifts in our media. I've spent my career as a strategist advising advocacy organizations, philanthropy, and corporations on social impact and their storytelling, as well as helping start and grow a number of startups at the nexus of marketing and impact. So pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Fantastic. And last but certainly not least, Kite.
Hi, everybody, and thanks from me too for having me. I'm Kate O'Loughlin, CEO of SuperAwesome. SuperAwesome is the leader in engaging kids and teens when they're online. Our software data tech is used primarily by advertisers and agencies and makers of digital experiences to help them connect with Gen Z and Gen Alpha. I am been CEO of SuperAwesome for the last 18 months, and I was previously the COO. But I started my career as a systems engineer working on tech for the government at Lockheed Martin, but came to advertising technology and startups about 17 years ago as a product manager, and eventually experimented in going more commercial. And that's what led me now to being CEO. So excited for this conversation.
Fantastic. So as you guys can see, we've got a diverse, intelligent, and I don't know if I can say this, but badass group of people here talking today. And we'll talk a little bit about how to identify and approach mentors, build a diverse network of mentors, navigate career transitions, and nurture those relationships and strategies for showcasing your skills. But I want to first aim the first question to Christina. Your company does a lot of work in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, right? That's something that I imagine is top of mind for a lot of folks, especially given our current, cultural politicization and whatnot. So I want to ask, what role did intersectionality kind of play in your mentorships and your networking?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It's a very intense time to be doing this kind of work. But all of us here and everyone in our field really understand the challenge of being a woman in our industry in particular. We make up the majority of people working in the sector, but we're also like not often the leadership. So of course, all of us have been in the position of working with lots of brilliant women. At the same time, only about 9% of the industry are Latina. Only about 7% are Black. And that changes the dynamic for some of us who have to navigate layers of our identity in the workplace. And it means also not necessarily having many or any role models or mentors who look like us or are women of color in leadership. That ends up requiring us to look elsewhere for support and for mentors, sometimes to people and women in other fields, sometimes with our peers in the industry who can give us some real talk, cheer us on, be that like guiding force for us. And that just ends up being different than maybe some other dynamics as we navigate it.
It's very interesting. A couple years ago, I went to a panel that was hosted by Issa Rae, the creator of the Insecure series on HBO. And she said something that I thought has stuck with me for years, which is this idea of like, so often when we're looking for mentors, we look to reach up, right? The person that's above us or has done the work before us, and that will be our mentors. But sometimes it's more important to reach across and kind of work in partnership with those that are kind of in the same space of you, so everybody can, what is the lift as we grow type deal. So the next question is kind of geared at that to Shoshana. We've talked about this before, and you mentioned something interesting about the idea of like no one formally mentored you. So without a formal mentorship, like, did you reach across the aisle? How did you navigate that?
So I think I posted as I was promoting this event on LinkedIn this morning, I was trying to think of what to say around this subject. And I don't know if it's a timing thing, but when I, a million years ago, it feels like, started my career, the notion of mentorship just wasn't even mentioned to me. It wasn't even a thought. I think that young women starting in careers where they didn't have any guidebook, and I think marketing and advertising are ones where back then, particularly, you didn't go to school for it, right? And so you felt lucky if you landed at an ad agency with a great boss working on a great piece of business with a lot of smart people around you, right? And that happened to me a bunch of times. But I would say that that is something that I really feel like I lacked, which was I didn't have the intentionality of what did I need that was going to take me to the next level. I think I was naive in thinking I'm just going to do a good job and that's going to be enough. And so in real time, probably in the middle of my career, and I think particularly when I was also navigating young motherhood, which is a whole other layer, right? I really was struggling. And so I think that what I'll say, and that's when I turned to your point, across the aisle. And I would say that they were, some people call it a board of directors, which is you identify individuals that get you, that know you, that understand your power, and are also honest enough with you to sort of call you out on your BS, excuse my language. And then at the same time know enough about what it takes to go from place to place that they can guide you. And so I did that, but in a very unintentional way. And I think that that's what led to a lot of trial and error. I think women today, and I mentor a lot of women, are fortunate in that the notion is out there, and they are told even when they're in college, find a mentor, find somebody that can help you make these decisions that can clear the path for you. And so I think that there's a difference between having necessity be the way you navigate your career and finding yourself exposed in situations that definitely teach you a lot, but you wish that you would have had someone that you could have sort of asked a question of or had them share their experience. The last thing I would say, and there's an awesome, I think I mentioned this in some of our pre-discussions, Kimeko, there's a book written by, it's a Harvard Business Review book called Forget a Mentor, Get a Sponsor. And it was written probably, I want to say at least 15 years ago, But it was one of those books that was such a watershed moment for me, because I think as a woman rising up, I just felt lucky that I was allowed to be a mom and an executive at a big company. And I just kept my head down and just didn't want to make waves, right? And what this woman says in the book is, particularly for women and people of color, that's not enough. And that having someone that just gives you advice without them having skin in the game is really not going to be effective for you. And it's why, as Christina said, we have so few models of real female leadership at the C levels and beyond, and certainly people of color. And what this woman says is, you need somebody who is in your organization, who has influence, and who is willing to go out on a limb for you. And if we all sit back and think about that, very few people will make that list. And then you got to hope that that person is still in the job and could continue to give you that kind of sponsorship. So I think in this world, I think we have to be super strategic and forward thinking about the relationships we make and how we use them. And I don't think it's one person. I think it's probably the board of directors.
Absolutely. I'm going to hold on to that thought because I want to circle back around to the idea of mentorship versus sponsorship, which is really, really interesting circle there. But before I move on, Kate, I want to circle back with you. And again, we've kind of been on this topic of, reaching across versus up when it comes to finding a mentor. Talk to me a little bit about what that looks like and kind of how you work that out.
Yeah, I think we've all been in the similar situations through our career where you didn't always have someone to look up to. But I have been quite fortunate in having peers and people I look in different parts and maybe different parts of the organization who kind of got me and I got them and we pulled each other along. I can think of actually my peer at my last company, and she and I were actually competitors in that we were running different business units and we would compete for priorities and compete for resources, but we needed each other to raise all boats. Like we needed each other to be successful because we didn't have necessarily the authority in the organization to, do the things that we knew we could each do. And really that took having each other's backs and like lift in kind of sharing where we needed to share information and advocating for each other, even if that meant sometimes like a give and get, right? And so I think that maybe even, coming back to that sponsorship, we gave each other what we needed, and it was like we had each other's backs in that way. And I also think that, that can come in the form of like sponsorship can come in the form of learning too, and getting from people things that you need to grow in that might not be like you're growing because you're getting a promotion or you're growing because you're getting more money, but you're growing in like the things that you're learning and the risks that you're able to take because you've asked someone for assistance. And so I think especially in tech or, how fast things are moving and learning new things like the application of AI, that topic of reaching out to have people help you take a risk is super important for growth and like a different dimension of leadership. I remember it's kind of a little maybe a bit of a dated stat now, but it really stuck with me, this Hewlett-Packard study that looked at applicants for new jobs or new positions in companies. And it said that men would apply to a job if they met 60% of the criteria, but women felt that they had to have 100% of the criteria to go for it. And look, in technology and in AI and how fast things are moving, no one is ever going to be 100% ready for a thing, right? And so, when tackling technology, you need to take a risk, and in taking risk, you have to be able to reach out and ask people for help in getting prepared and helping you see the experience that you do have might lend to your success in taking a risk.
I think I love the story that you told us of friends to enemies to friends or counterparts kind of working together so that all boats rise with the tide. That's the phrase I was looking for earlier. But you all have touched on this topic of mentorship versus sponsorship. Mentorship, I think, in conversations like these gets a lot of credit in top, headlines and talking time, but there's a difference between what makes a mentor and what makes a sponsor. So how do you all, and this is a question for all of you, how do you define what is a mentor and what is a sponsor? And how should people looking for those, like how does somebody know what lever to pull, when to tap a mentor versus when to tap a sponsor?
Yeah, I think Shoshana said that really well about thinking about it as someone who has the skin in the game, who will do something, risk something for you. And that can be just as like someone literally going to their leadership table and going, Shoshana is it. Shoshana is the one, y'all. Like, this is the person we need in this job. Or, any number of pieces. But it is, I think, at the core, different than mentorship because it's transactional in a certain way. You are getting something out of it. You are, it is also like not the kind of relationship where you're going to let yourself be totally vulnerable and share all your fears and anxieties that you might do with a board of directors style kind of relationship. It is a relationship where you are trying to really be thoughtful and strategic about advancement, and that person sees your value and what you can bring to the next position in your career, which is super important in its own way.
I love that. And I love that you asked, when do you use which? Because what that says to me is it's not mutually exclusive, right? Like the whole, it takes a village. 30 years in, man, it takes a whole city if we want to be really honest about it. I think that and this may be a way generalist way of saying it, the need to have a sponsor, at least in my experience, took place much more in large, complex, highly political organizations. So in other words, because, and I could say that now, like sitting where I'm sitting, which is a privilege to be in this seat, but I realize how much energy I spent in the last 10 years worrying about things that I could not control, right? They use this word, your, sort of your reputation, or who's saying what about you, or things that really have nothing to do with the substance of your performance, but really around the intentions of others as they are either involved in self-preservation or moving up their own ladder. And it creates a very fearful environment. And I think particularly for women, and I think for other minority groups, when I felt like I needed air cover and a sponsor is when I was scared that for whatever reason, I was going to get let go because corporate downsizing was going on and I was a senior person. And if someone didn't like something, that could be enough of a reason, right? So having somebody who has a seat at the table to vouch for you and provide you that air cover, and it sounds terrible, but I got to say it's true. I would say, and specifically when I mentor younger women who are asking me the question, what am I going to get more out of working in a very large organization where I have clients that are Fortune 500, but I'm probably going to have less visibility. I was literally having a conversation with a woman yesterday about this. Or do I work in a smaller environment where maybe my clients are not super famous, but I can have a seat at the table and really be responsible for their transformation? And I think it depends on the person and what you value. I would say that for me, I wish that I was taught a little bit more about what it takes to play that political game, and how it's not really about performance, and not beat yourself up about things you can't control, and then also be a little bit more selfish about that's not an organization I want to be a part of then. Like if that's really what it takes, then maybe my style is to be in a completely different environment. And I'm not saying that's true for everybody, but I think that again, like when I started, it makes it sound like I started in the Stone Age. We didn't feel like we had agency. You were like, wow, I got this job on this big account. Thank goodness, and just be happy with what you have. And I think that I encourage women in their 20s and 30s and 40s to you don't ask for it, you don't get it, right? That asking is not a problem, and we should feel entitled to do that, because that's really what's going to make the difference.
Yeah. I was in that situation, Shoshana, where I asked for something I knew was going to take a long time to get, which was the seat as CEO of the company. The founding CEO, he's kind of typical founder's got to found. He's had 4 exits. And so I knew it wouldn't be forever that he would be running the company. And I worked up the courage to say to him one day, I want to be the heir apparent. But that took his sponsorship and his investment in time for him to help me get ready to take over. And it was a transaction, to your point, Christina, of like, he was going to be able to have an off ramp if I was ready to step up. And it wasn't a given that I was going to be successful, but I did need to communicate that I wanted to put the work in and I wanted to put the effort in to try. And I think that's an important part of pulling the sponsorship lever, is that you are going to have to give that person the fuel to keep, putting their neck out for you. And like a funny story around that is we went to dinner, he and I, and he ordered this huge seafood tower, and we were in England, and not all the seafood is the same as the seafood we have here. And there were just things I just didn't even know how to open. And they gave all these different clamps and tools and all these things. And so I just started taking some of the seafood and kind of like, was like trying not to use my teeth to thing. And then I finally said to him, could you please help me understand how to open this thing? And then I knew in that moment that was the test. If I had just sat back and, literally gone hungry and not even tried to eat the things that I didn't know how to open, he would have known like that was a little sign that I wasn't willing to like try, put in the effort and have some error. But then if I also just like used my teeth and like forcibly took the thing out and didn't ask him for help, that was another sign that like it wasn't going to work out, and him being my sponsor. And so it really does, it is a give and take in sponsorship, that you have to both be putting in the work,
I just want to say one quick thing to it's the most amazing story, because I literally have a mental picture of you sitting in a London restaurant and like looking at strange pieces of seafood and tools. But like, I think what you said is so important. And I see this a lot. And this is like a woman thing versus a man thing. And I don't still know why. And I'm the mother of 2 daughters in their 20s. But the people are scared to ask for help, either because they think it reflects on their own capability or the edge that they may have, or because they assume that nobody wants to help them. And I actually think for most human beings, people love helping. First of all, it gives them an ego boost. I think that gentleman that sat across from you, Kate, was like, he was feeling it. He was like, she needs my help, like, so he got something out of that. And I think we forget that as humans, that's a high. And I think if the more we ask, I think the more you'd be surprised at what people are willing to give.
Absolutely. And I love these real life moments that kind of illustrate and make these concepts tangible, right? For the people that are listening to these conversations. One thing that I do think is important to note is that a lot of this revolves around having a relationship already in place with the person that you're looking for to be your mentor or your sponsor. We have seen so many headlines, especially post-COVID, about the, struggle to maintain relationships, to maintain friendships and job hunting hardships. And I think all of these signs, to me at least, indicate that it's harder to move and build that village, than it has been in the past. So what tips do you guys have for being able to build a robust network and kind of expand beyond your immediate circle?
Yeah, I think at this moment in particular, trust is really at an all-time low. Like our trust in so many dynamics has tanked, and that extends to our networks. It's difficult sometimes to judge who to trust, who to connect with, to ensure you feel safe while you're doing that and communicating with someone. And that also means not always like wanting to open the door to new people. I think I have found that in particular in the last, 4 to 5 months, because that's been really hard for my business and me personally in the industry right now. And so I have to remind myself all the time not to like shut down, right? But as my business partner likes to say, I'm going to be me, and the folks who get it will show up. They'll show up for me too, right? And that's all we really can do. And even doing the smallest things in this time when you feel maybe less secure or less open, is really even just like doing the small things, reading all the stuff, commenting so people like engage with you, grabbing the coffee, having my friend the other night was like, I have this amazing woman. She seems like she's in a similar industry. Come have dinner. Going to the dinner, even when you're tired after working however many hours and dealing with however many crises, and having the glass of wine and seeing actually, oh, we have so much to give to each other. And this was a great time. And you can feel like refreshed and revived by that. All of that keeps you connected and open to what could come next.
I would just say, and I've said this to teams I've led multiple times, I think that we're so heads down all the time doing the work and getting through the day. Like I try to remind myself and those that work with me is that every time you get, whether it's sitting across from somebody or on a Zoom or Teams or name your web conferencing application of the day, that moment is a platform for you. Like I know that's like a terrible word right now because it means a million things, but like getting a job where you get to represent a client that is in an industry that's highly visible is a platform for you, right? Every time you sit across from any client, any level, you have an opportunity both like to create a connection, to build value, for them to have a certain impression of you. And as somebody who, without intention, had too many jobs in my 30 years, being in this job, I can't tell you that two of the new pieces of business that we're very close on are through people who I had that moment with or moments and who remembered me and either thought I was smart or funny or crazy. And as Christina said, they were up for that, right? And so I think that like not just getting through the day and being heads down and getting the work done, but really looking at a job or a responsibility of work that you're doing in the communications business, which is external, living that, but for your own good, right? And linking in with everybody you meet actually does have value, despite the dilution of those relationships. But it works. So I think I would just say be present and recognize that little box that you're occupying up on the screen is like someone's little TV show that day. And be entertaining and be personal and use it in a way that will benefit both of you.
Perfect. And Kate, is there anything you wanted to add there?
No, I would just say that like even the small moments count. They've been trying to be better about when someone kind of like enters my mind of like I have a fleeting thought about them. Someone maybe I haven't talked to in a few years. Been trying to just write them like a 3-line email that says, "Hey, I thought of you today because da da da. I think you're amazing." There's no like I didn't need anything from them. I didn't need them in the moment, but like they will remember that, and then then it won't feel weird, in 10 years when you want to talk to them again.
Yeah, I think that's a really good tip. I will say, one of the things that I've even learned in my own career that's important is I haven't explicitly had to network with people per se, right? A lot of these things have been through like acquaintances and friendships, which have turned into my network, my community. I don't think, again, as I started this conversation, that I'd be able to make the career pivots and transitions that I did without those people, right? So, let's kind of feed into that and talk to me a little about career transitions. They can be daunting. So talk to me a little bit about what are kind of some key strategies and I guess ways that you can leverage that community that you've built to make those transitions.
I guess I'll jump in. I feel like my whole career has been one big transition. I think to go back to the village and obviously I think not every relationship is going to be as deep and valued as others, right? Like it's funny, the relationships that are still the most valuable to me are ones that I made super early in my career, like 30 years ago. I worked in my first advertising agency, and those men and women that I work with, everybody was in their 20s, and it was a crazy time. It was an independent agency. We were working on an amazing client. It was Snapple when it was independently owned, and we all felt super lucky. being on the front lines with people like that really stays with you. And so I think that, throughout my career, when I was either in a situation where I didn't know if this was the role I needed to stay in, or I just needed validation. Am I seeing this correctly? Almost like pseudotherapy, being able to talk to somebody that I consider to be my peer who would see things in a similar way was so powerful, whether that person had someone to introduce me to or not. And I think that we get very focused on the interview and the resume but I think all the other stuff, the sort of the conversations, the glasses of wine at an impromptu Tuesday night, those are the ones that I think really, really mean the most. And I'll give a shout out to, there's one individual in my career, and he's the reason I'm sitting here. My friend Adam Lavelle. I was his client. I ran marketing for Audible, which was literally a dream job, and I still look back as a dream job. This was way before Amazon owned them. It was before the iPod existed, so we're talking a long time ago. And he was my agency. It was my first agency that I hired, and I was the head of marketing. And we just became like really, really close friends because I just loved the way he was thinking. He ended up being my boss twice, and he was my sponsor in many of those cases. And when I knew I wanted to leave Dentsu about 7 or 8 months ago, he said to me, I'm on the board of an agency and we're looking for a new CEO. And I literally said to him, so what? And he said, well, that's you. And I said, I've never been a CEO of an agency. And he said, yes, you have. And so, and that relationship was not formed because I intentionally said, will you be my mentor? Will you be my sponsor? It was just being intellectually curious, being excited about being around somebody who can offer you a new way of thinking and turning that into a friendship. My best friends were people who could geek out about marketing because it's the way I behave in the world, right? I look at Kate and Christina, and I bet you we would have a great time if we went out for drinks, right? And so like that organic kind of thing, like the way you were just saying, I found more powerful than when I formally asked to meet with somebody who was like on the board of something, and ask them for help.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think like the relationships that have turned into the most fruitful like mentorships or sponsorships, I would never, I'm even doing air quotes to myself because I would never call them that. That wouldn't like, that is what they are, I guess, in a certain way, but like they haven't done that. And I think they've been critical for those career transitions. So there are probably in transitions when you feel the least sure of yourself, right? And that's when you really need the support. And I think for me, the biggest transitions I have gone through in my career and in the industry were really around motherhood. So like having my first child and then, needing to like switch agencies and having to like make that transition or switch my job entirely. And one of my, really close peers and sort of friends and mentors was there for me and really helped me make that transition. She hired me. She helped give me really the break in between, not a career break, but a break to actually like go with her, figure it out, like try something new, take the risk and be okay. And that showed up again later with a whole other person who was now my business partner when we decided to start our business. I was 9 months pregnant then and like had my son 2 days after or something like that. We decided to start the business. It was a truly bonkers thing to do. It is not a rational thing to do. But I think having that kind of circle of people around me and people who were like cheering me on, being like, we know you. We're like, yes, this is crazy, totally cuckoo, but like, you can do this. And like, if it's anybody's going to do it, it's you. So here I am, like, roaming around Manhattan trying to look for office space with the baby attached to me. And they're like, yeah, that's so Christina. So like having the people around you who really truly believe in you make a huge difference during those moments of transition.
Yeah. And the people around you can, I think what we're saying here is become sort of organic champions of you because of the relationships. I do think that there is some importance to architecting the people that you want around you when you're going through a transition, and being honest about what you need to be, how you need to be different, or things that you need to have exposure to be successful in a new role. And that might mean that you need to expand your network into people that maybe you're not so comfortable with, or like people that you wouldn't sort of like necessarily pick for a Friday night. And so, not they're not lovely people, but like I knew coming into SuperAwesome, which is a very compliance and policy focused, business, that I needed to be friends with lawyers. I needed to know them, I needed to love them, and they needed to love me back. Right. And when I transitioned into more of a company strategy and COO role, I needed to have more exposure to finance. Right. And so finding the people that knew those things and purposely going to seek those relationships to help me grow and to complement where I was good and would need them to balance me out. That was important as part of a career transition, is architecting the people around you.
I think that's interesting. And throughout this conversation, we've looked at this a couple of times, and I think it kind of lends itself to the idea of a transition as well, right? Is the advent of generative AI, something that we cannot escape. It's everywhere. And I think we can all agree that part of a career change that we'll all face at some form or fashion is AI, right? Last month, Harvard Business Review wrote that women are adopting generative AI at a significantly lower rate than men. So talk to me a little about, in the idea, in the spirit of transitioning and navigating, like how do we then apply that to adopting and adapting to new tech?
So I'll date myself again. Nothing could be more game-changing than working during the advent of the commercial internet. So I was working in a traditional advertising agency in the early 90s, or mid 90s, I should say. And before the commercial internet, we had one workstation in our agency where you can access the interweb, is what we would call it. Like, I think we had email, I don't even remember. I think that I'm very curious about that stat. Like, I find that stat really interesting. But for those of us who have been through multiple, let's call it transformations and bubbles and bursted bubbles, I've seen almost every one of them in the 30 years I've been in the space, I think the question is how do you look past the noise and at the moment, because we live in a social media world, the bright, shiny object syndrome, I will call it, and get to what's real and what's actionable. And so there's a little bit, I think, and I think we all know this about our industry, there's a little bit of a hype cycle that's about who's the smartest person in the room. And it's really about how entertaining you could be at a cocktail party, and not necessarily what's going to make you more efficient, smarter, better at what you do. And so what's worked for me, and I'll tell you, I happen to have been, during that time I worked at that agency, I was part of a small group of people building an internet company, which no one knew it was called that then, in 1996. And it ended up being a company called 6 Degrees, which was the first social media platform that was ever created. We didn't know that at the time. And the only reason I was excited about it was because I can envision how it was going to change everything. And I think as AI right now, although it's super interesting and powerful, I don't think it's refined enough yet for it to be anything more than something that feels like it's going to potentially make us more efficient or Big Brother. I'm being reductive, but I think that that's where we're at. I think that it is 100% our responsibility to stay on top of it, but to use our own reasoning to say, separate the forest from the trees, right? What about it is really going to matter? And what about it is really about driving stock prices or hype cycles at big conferences? And I think that that's very, very hard to do when you're in the middle of a hype cycle and you're trying to get your work done. So I think that, what we've done, what we're doing at Converge, and this was a big thing at Dentsu as well, is you need to identify individuals who are dedicated to digging into it on a regular basis and being able to share in I think, a really actionable way, ways that we're going to adopt it that are going to have an impact. versus just going all in and finding out that when it really comes down to the bottom line, it's not really yet ready yet to impact the business as we see it. So,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
I think the hype cycle point is so true, and like trying to separate that out. At the same time, a lot of, in particular, our industry around marketing, like the functionality, there's a lot of work in the AI space that is really coming for us in some serious ways. And how long that takes is totally a giant question, but I think, you know, part of our responsibility is to lean into it and figure out where we're going to gain from it, where it's going to impact the business, as you said, Shoshana, but also not be scared, right? Because the worst thing any of us could do is to hide from it, because that is just a recipe for disaster. And I think in part just being able to, like, in some ways, it being in the digital space, allow all of us to mess around with it, to fail, to like be silly. The risk is low. There's less like public exposure of it. So it's actually okay to like be trying around. And, you know, for me, I use it almost every day at this point. Charlene, that's my nickname for ChatGPT. Charlene's my girl. She's on my side. She's my favorite research assistant. I'm like, what's up, Charlene? Help me with this thing. She's serious. So I know it's deeply problematic to humanize and get the GPTs, but I think just being able to be like willing to try it, and it is obviously disconcerting to see a GPT refine your writing or something like that. But it is useful, and it's interesting to like just give yourself space to play.
Christina, why do you think that the stats say that women are behind men in this?
Well, I imagine like most industries, technology in particular is like deeply male dominated, but in terms of like consumer use, I think it's very similar, right? Like the like Reddit chains and all the bros and podcasts that are like talking about it endlessly, you know, it's like the same people who are like obsessed with blockchain. So it's like
BCG put out a different stat that says women who are tech leaders are actually embracing AI more than their male counterparts, but only after several years of experience and because they're already familiar with their, you know, confident in tech. So I think like there is hope, right, for adoption led by women.
That I relate to way
you
more.
have to be comfortable, you know, in the jargon.
But I think like if we went back to the stat that was shared at the beginning of our conversation, right? Like the imposter syndrome thing. I forgot who brought this up about most women, when they look at a job description, they'll say, I'm only 60% qualified. So, and said no man ever, right? I wonder if there's also like like the reporting of that study is women are actually more adept than they think they are, but they're just reporting at it.
That's true. That's true.
Because our bar is so freaking high on our definition of competence that we maybe underserve our own knowledge of certain things.
That's true. I also think we have the most to gain in use, women in general, because the most efficient professionals I've ever worked with in my life are women. We have a lot going on. We got like families to take care of. We got careers. We got all kinds of things. And like from an efficiency standpoint, that alone, like just actually tapping in to be like, how do I use this to make my life easier, my work faster, or whatever it is to gain? Like women in general, I think there's like a connection to that that could be really, really useful for us.
And that actually might be an impediment for experimentation, right? Like as working moms, we know you like you got to get done to make dinner and get kids in baths. And so you got to get the work done. And the thought of like, I'm going to take an hour to like goof around with a new piece of tech that I don't really understand. It doesn't feel like work, but it is like you have to think about that as part of your job is to try new things and be experimental. And, you know, you should get paid for that because that's going to advance you and it's going to advance your company. So it's like that, you know, being a workhorse you need to kind of expand your view of what's considered work in order to be an experimental to try new tech like this.
Absolutely. So, Kate, what you're telling me is that I need to use ChatGPT beyond asking it to meal prep for me.
Yeah. Yes.
See, you totally did it. That's right. Like, let it help with the other parts of our lives. It's useful.
And Christina will come up with a name for it too.
Give
Yeah, I
it
call
your
her my
own
homegirl
name.
too. I always say, homegirl, help me on.
No, do not let the tech bros name it for you and give you exactly.
Um, the last thing that I want to ask you, and I think this is kind of a question that is a culmination of all the things that we've discussed throughout our time together today, everything from leadership to mentorship to sponsorship, even AI. What are some of the biggest challenges, or excuse me, what are some of the biggest changes that you've seen in your career development in the last couple of years, and what advice would you give after having navigated those changes?
I think that one of the biggest changes has been work from home. I do think that has really changed the dynamic and who gets some of the opportunities in career development. Because if you're seen and you're at the water cooler and people consider you and they give you more chances. And I think a lot of women, for lots and lots of good reasons, are opting to stay home more than maybe making the effort to go into an office. And I think in the long term, that's actually going to be, we will find part of the limitation that women have experienced. And so I think, the finding the right balance of getting yourself, and if you can't get into an office, then finding other ways to make sure that you're seen by leadership or seen by other parts of your organization is really important to your personal development. It's a big change that as leaders, you have to recognize and give people the opportunity when they're home, but you also have to make the effort yourself to be seen.
I would say, and I think that this is speaking as somebody who, I don't want to say I'm at the end of my career, but like I'm definitely in the senior portion of my career. It's not linear. Like I think that maybe because I wasn't mentored or I didn't ask enough of the right questions early on, my conventional wisdom was like the way you know you're doing well is if you get promoted, make more money, get promoted. But I think that when you get to a certain level of seniority, so you're like here and there is one more or two more rungs, and then you go look at those people and what they have to do all day long, or what it will take. Sometimes I think it's about selling your soul. Like I came across certain moments where I realized the reason I couldn't do it was because I wasn't willing to do that kind of job and what that would mean for me as a human being. I don't think I could do it. Is that and I think the work from home thing in a way enabled this. Is I think there's way more ways to have career progression today than ever before. The flexibility that this has created, the side hustle, the use of the internet and AI to help you build things quickly that can act as ways to market yourself in a variety of different ways is so different than the trajectory that I was offered, when I graduated college a million years ago. And so as much as I know that people think there's a lot of security in working for a company with a logo and a 401k and health insurance, I get that. I encourage, one of my daughters is more of an artist, and I encourage her all the time to say, you can really write your own ticket. You don't have to work for a corporation if you don't want to, or if it's not going to work, and you can be successful. So I think we also have to redefine what career development means, and it's not necessarily linear or one-dimensional.
Yeah, that's really.
I was just gonna say, I remember when I left working at Lockheed, it was my first job out of school, and my parents were like, "What's your pension? What about your pension?" And I took like a down and over and moved and like did a bunch of things that seemed contrary to to your exact point of like,
my God.
yes, we do this business, but I'm so glad I did.
Oh my God. I told my dad I was going to work for an internet company in 1996. You can't even imagine what that conversation was. What's the internet?
Yeah, I think my advice was going to be something really similar about it's just not being linear. And I think people are moving in and out of the industry, and that traditional ladder of roles like doesn't I mean, it can exist, but it doesn't really for a lot of some of the most interesting, successful people out there. Their people are leveraging their expertise in new fields, new sectors, different types of media, and that integration is making a lot of exciting work. All of the side hustles people are doing now, those things are amazing, and they can turn into an entire new path or multiple paths. And I think that is really where you see like the future of careers changing from that traditional sort of like ladder that all of us thought about as we were like going to get the promotion to be like, well, you know, I'm also interested in these 7 other things. Let's see where this goes.
Yep.
And this generation now, Gen Alpha, they are really embracing the side hustle in the nonlinear way to think about themselves. We just did some research that shows that kids are basically making comparable money in their internet side hustles, like making skins for avatars and selling things, UGC and Roblox, as they make money in mowing lawns and babysitting. And that, you know, that takes creativity and gumption to try new things, but they are definitely a generation of nonlinear thinkers.
I cannot wait to hear what my 6-year-old decides he's going to start selling on the internet. When he's 15, he's already like cracked 3 career paths before I give him advice. So yeah.
Good for him. I should have taken the MySpace coding that I was doing when I was in middle school a little bit more seriously. Listen, this conversation has been so fulfilling. I learned a lot from you ladies, and I hope that our listeners did too. It's been a fantastic conversation. We're going to go ahead and wind down, and I am going to say thank you one more time and pass it back to Sammy to close us out.
Yes, thank you so much. What an incredible conversation. That was amazing. I learned something new from every event that we do. We'll be hosting more events like this in the future, so please follow along on LinkedIn where you'll see what we have in store. Thank you again to our incredible moderator and panelists, and thank you all for joining.